Okay, my name is Sara Bradshaw. It's July 30th, 2020, and I'm in my home in Crossville, Tennessee, and this is my studio portion of my home. I'm a member of the Chattanooga Modern Quilt Guild and the Studio Art Quilts Associates Guild, and I'm here today to talk about my quilt Ocean. This is a quilt that I completed in 2017. And basically the inspiration for this quilt is I love a lot of texture, a lot of raw edges, torn pieces, loose pieces, and a lot of kind of chunky texture to my quilts. There's always some kind of big stitch or I leave the knots out. And normally these are things that make the quilt police really crazy. So it's always kind of unusual. I love to just kind of hang back and hear the feedback on my quilts more than anything else because it's just funny. Either you love them or you hate them. This particular quilt, I started with the gradation of color because obviously it's inspired by the ocean and kind of the colors you see across the surface as it sort of fades and disappears with the sunlight and the interaction between the surface of the water and the light. So I started with the color gradation. And then what I did is I had a quilt of these various different colors all together, all these different pieces put together. And I just laid one solid piece on top of the quilt. And it's always good to have a good friend that's an excellent long armer. And for me, that's Danielle Johnson. So I kind of explained to her what I wanted to do because it is such a large quilt. And because I did have more layers than usual, that top layer is an additional layer that you need to quilt through. So Danielle, I said, here's what I'm looking for. And I kind of drew on my quilt with the disappearing marker so that she could sort of follow where I was going with this. And she long armed the larger pieces of this. And then when she was finished, I went back through and I cut away every single piece that's here in the middle. So whatever you see underneath are the pieces that I had to carefully cut out. Once that was all done, I went back and I washed the quilt and I dried it on a regular dryer. And even though I pre-washed all my fabric, I knew I would have some more fraying and things like that. So that's where you see all of these little loose edges and threads. I know it's difficult to see on video, but in person it has a lot of texture. And once that was done, I went back through with pearl cottons all the way up to 5. I have some 12, some 8, and some 5 in there to add even more dimension and texture in it. And it's been in a couple of local shows, and some of them it did really well, and some of them the judges had comments like, why didn't you trim this thing up? Which I guess they sort of missed what I was going for. But luckily, in fall of 2019, the Fall Paducah Show, it actually took 3rd place in the Quilter's Choice. And it was just the funniest picture ever to look at the picture of my quilt next to these 2 other quilts, which were these amazing, like Baltimore album type quilts with this intricate applique. And they were just so perfect and so traditional. And then there was my quilt. But I was really happy it did well, and I was really happy that people kind of got it and they really enjoyed it. So that's my story.